If you've done the summer camp thing long enough, you should be smart enough to realize that we have a lot of really nice people watching over really nice people as they take care of kids, and nobody wants to be the bad guy. On top of that, most of our staff are school teachers and the kind of people who have never worked in a serious business before. As our guru Michael Brandwine says, if you want your staff to act professional, you need to treat them professionally. And that starts with accountability. And we've got a lot to talk about today with our friends Justin and Eric. This is the Day Camp Pod.
This is the Day Camp Pod from Go Camp Pro, bringing you the best ideas, strategies, and discussions in the day camp industry. You can find our show notes at daycamppodcast.com.
Let me tell you about CampMinder, the #1 camp database in the world. It has the most robust offerings of service features found anywhere. Every feature works together to create a full, seamless system that helps your camp office run more efficiently while giving your camp family state-of-the-art communication and financial tools. Check out the details at campminder.com. AM Skyer is a leading insurance and strategic partner for many of the finest camps in America. AM Skyer partners with camps to provide public relations, legal, medical, behavioral support, and more. Experience the AM Skyer difference. Learn more at amskyer.com. The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source for recreation solutions that will ensure that your camp thrives. Explore their website today at CRS4Rec. CRS is serious about fun.
Welcome back to the Day Camp Pod. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly Burbs in New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And I'm Jordanna Grossinger, Director of Camp Robin Hood in Ontario, Canada.
And today we have the illustrious Justin Pritikin back with our friend from Texas, Eric Hillis. How's it going, guys?
Excited to be here.
Yeah, yeah. We reference you a lot, Eric. You finally made it.
Wow.
So before we get started with our topic, I want to talk about what you guys have been doing with your buddy Jack, this career accelerator thing. It sounds very exciting. How's it go? Can you please explain it to everybody really quickly and let us know how it's going?
Yeah, we got together in January and wanted to we were having a conversation about how there aren't clear pathways to necessarily move up in the camp industry. And we wanted to create a way for young people to be able to highlight not only their interest in becoming camp directors, but their skills and basically say, I'm ready for this, and demonstrate that in a way that camp owners would say, okay, now I have enough evidence, I'm ready to hire you. And so we created this program, the Camp Career Accelerator program, and we have 3 fellows in the first cohort starting this summer.
Super exciting. I mean, Justin, you want to add anything? I mean, to me, it's like you found that a lot of young people were being under-mentored, right? They felt underutilized in their organizations and no path up. And it's a who kind of business. So you're creating sort of an on-ramp for them, which is pretty cool.
And this job is hard in all levels of it, whether you're working with kids on the front line or you're an admin position type person. And so we hire these people to do these very demanding jobs, and they have no mentoring and they don't have the actual skills to do this. And then they crash out and they're out in 2 to 5 years because they're getting underpaid, overworked, and they don't feel like they're winning and they're failing. So we want these people to be unmissable in terms of their skill set, is undeniable that you want to hire them because they've been trained and mentored and brought to that level, but then also ready to take on that responsibility because of their experience and that mentoring that comes with it.
Excellent. Excellent. So in regard to our topic, you reminded me right before we got on that I went to an awesome session with Kelly Shuna this summer, and it was all about being tough with your staff and all that kind of stuff. And I was in this room with like 60, 70 camp professionals who were just like, oh, well, give them a chance and all this kind of stuff. And meanwhile, I've been living in a house for the last 4 months with Justin Pritikin, who's been telling me that I shouldn't invite back 1/3 of my staff, that we should call the first 2 weeks of camp tryouts, right? And we should overhire because we're going to fire people, and just a bit of a different mentality. So I don't know what your 8 months at Lululemon did to you, but it's a little different than most camps.
Sure. So many ways to take that. I mean, every job has a probation period, and camp shouldn't be any different. I mean, the first 2 weeks, is an open audition in the sense of you're not entitled to like a full 9 weeks at Everwood just because you bought Crocs and you went to camp in middle school or whatever. And we've kind of, as an industry, normalized this idea that everyone deserves this full season. And we need to test that potential in the first 2 weeks and then reward that performance with the rest of the summer. And ultimately, staffing is like pruning a tree, is like the analogy I'm always saying. It's like if you never cut, nothing grows. And that third, they either weren't aligned, they weren't ready, they weren't it, and that's fine. But keeping them out of guilt is how culture dies. And I'm not here to collect warm bodies. And fortunately for everyone, people are applying. So when I think about retention and how people use it as a success metric, it's not a success metric unless the right people are staying. And so I want to keep them. I want them to be excited to come to camp. I don't want them to show up at staff training and see Johnny and go, Johnny sucks. Why the hell's Johnny back at camp? Like I want them excited about everything going on. So having high standards and maintaining them isn't necessarily a big deal for those folks. It's a big deal for the people who shouldn't be here.
I think you lose a lot of the ones that don't belong there organically too, though, because if you were able to keep them at a good or great enough level to make it through the year, they had a really hard time. And a lot of them will not come back because they realize they sucked. So I think a little of it happens organically too.
And I'm curious about like if I'm all for this of like these high standards that we're having. I'm just wondering what kind of level of support comes with these high standards of like accountability. So when you're talking about these high standards and saying first 2 weeks are tryouts, are you telling them that the first 2 weeks are tryouts, or is it like a test of like, let's see how you're doing? Like, where does that come into play when we talk about accountability?
I don't tell them, no. But
I'm thinking of telling them this year. I don't know.
But when I think about how I frame, especially the first 2 weeks at Everwood, it's like Friday of this summer of week 2 is the 4th of July. So we're off on that day. And so those first 9 days of camp, that group's going to have 10 to 11 kids in it. And then the rest of the summer, it's going to have anywhere between 14 to 20. Right. And so if you can't hack the first 9 days, and it doesn't take me 9 days to figure out whether or not I'm going to be like spending my whole August picking up after you. It takes me like literally 2 days at most. And so normalizing like that accountability and having those hard conversations, at the end of the day, empathy without accountability is enabling. And the respect that I feel like our staff have for myself, Jamie, and Dane comes from the consistency, not the volume. Jonathan Gold told me that if I want to be liked, I should sell ice cream. So, and if I want to run a camp, I have to be firm and I have to be clear and I have to be fair. And if you're afraid to be that person to hold people accountable, which I find most people are, like, what kind of person are you? And so direct feedback. I'm not talking about yelling. I'm not drama, just clarity. And it's not breaking trust to have hard conversations with people quickly. Most people want to pull the ripcord to like get out of it, but avoiding them does. And the first step to the loyalty that I think our staff have for us when we ask them to do demanding things, silly things, is trust. And that comes from conversation. And we're not trying to mistake necessarily popularity for leadership in that scenario. And we're okay with being the villain to people. If that means we have to fire them because they're bad, like I can live with that. I can sleep at night.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was saying in the intro, that we're nice people. There's a lot of nice people, and nice people don't generally want to have tough conversations. And as much as we try to tell them to, and like I was said at that ACA session I was at, those were with year-round staff people. Those weren't middle management seasonal people. Those were full timers, and of course, they're super nice people. Why else are we doing this? And I feel like I didn't get really tough at it until I had a mortgage. Honestly, until I was paying $24,000 a month on a mortgage. Then I was just like, oh, I am going to be tough. I have very high standards, right? Like, and I'm going to say something about it when I see it. And I think that just most humans are passive aggressive. They just are. And how do we instill that kind of ownership level feeling of accountability, right, to the next level? How can you make that happen? Like, you could scream it all you want from top of the mountain, but how are you going to get the next level to do it? Because that's the important level of doing it. That to me is the golden thing we need to find.
And I think teaching them that they can have those hard conversations without laying blame. I mean, if you're stick with the facts, you give the reasons, it's a hard conversation, but it's not demeaning in any way. And that's that will help people who need a little coaching make it to the next level, but you're still not putting up with the crap. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So
Of course.
if you get the middle management to realize that's not that scary, if you think about what you're going to say and you have it all laid out before you talk to them, you'll be fine.
Yeah. But everybody wants to be liked.
Everyone wants
It
to
goes
be.
back to the ice cream
Yeah,
metaphor.
but Andy, going back to your mortgage, what's more expensive, losing one burned out rookie or 7 great staff who are sick of cleaning up after them?
Yeah, but I
And
get that. I get that when it's my money. But if it's not my money, if I'm a
sure.
middle management person and this is my summer job and I'm making $5,000 no matter what.
Yeah, but when I think about if I'm bouncing around to like a random camp and doing this training, though, I guess the way I try to bring this in is like, don't we hate training new people? Like, don't we find that like a bit annoying to having to like train so many new people every day? So we have to give people reasons to want to stay. And a bad staff member is sometimes just burned out, and burnout isn't a free pass, but like it's our job to figure out if they need coaching, support, or an Uber home when we fire them. And figuring that out and with caution, of course, is important, and getting to that decision quickly is needed. And so I structure it where, like, yes, I do have a bunch of staff. That's how tryouts really start, starting the 3rd week of camp, because their availability stinks during the first 2 weeks. They're like, I have to go on vacation. I'm going to the Cape. And I go, great, amazing. You're going to start the 3rd week of camp. I don't know what you're going to do yet, but you're going to find out when you show up the weekend before. And so building that system, which is where I think the structure of how you kind of staff and within your organization is important to making this happen right, I believe.
And if we start there, though, just talking about the staffing and the structure of how you're going to set up your summer, I think that piece is what's been a little confusing and maybe polarizing as we train our middle management at our camps. Because think about the last few years. Just a few years ago, we were all begging for staff. We were like, I remember kind of being like, let's not upset anybody because I need to maintain my ratios. And we all lived that, right? And then we go from that, and we're in the same spot, Justin, where we have people that are at our door and we can be pickier about who we're putting in and who we're keeping longer. But I think the training has to evolve of how we're coaching the people, giving the feedback to those frontline staff members for sure. But I think some people, and maybe our listeners think this too, it's like either you're nice or you're firm. And I think what you're saying is like, how can we blend the two together? Like you can be firm and kind, direct and clear, but still with kindness. I just think that sometimes it's really polarizing for people to hear, like, right, nice or mean. But there's a lot of in the middle.
I used to get told all the time that I was quietly uncompromising. So I like to think that was firm, but empathetic. I don't know. Maybe I'm just stubborn.
No, it's like you wrote in the notes, Jordanna, you could have hugs and have high expectations. Like I do believe that. And if you think about the best teachers and the best coaches you've ever had in your life, that's what they were. They're people that were tough on you, it was tough love kind of folks.
Yeah, but I want to shut up after this because I want Eric to talk, because Eric's a genius with what he does at Champions. And what I'll say is camp is fun because we take it seriously. Anyone listening to this podcast, anyone on this podcast, we take camp seriously. And professionalism isn't the opposite of fun. It is the base of it. Play is the reward. Play only works when people feel safe, respected, and prepared. And we cannot build a great camp on vibes, as much as I would love to. Camp should be fun, but fun dies when staff don't show up and leave early without telling anyone, or think accountability is optional. Structure is not this like buzzkill, like a trampoline. It's like a trampoline. You bounce higher, the better the frame is underneath. We cannot have fun until we are running great organizations. It makes people feel safe to breathe, to then be crazy and campy. And if we're not giving people that, and if we're always in like a panic and stressed out because like, oh, is this person showing up? Are we staffed? Like all these things, it's not going to work. And I think that was what I realized the first summer when I was working in Everwood, is like they came out of that state of staffing was tough and everyone was used to that panic and everyone was hyperbolic and emotionally volatile from it. And now we're in peacetime.
Yeah.
The war is over.
Yeah. Well, but Jordanna talked about the last 5 years being tough coming out of the pandemic. I mean, for someone that's been doing this for 30 years, I will go back to 30 years. Like it wasn't as bad as it was in 2021, 2022, but it's always been a struggle. And this year, I agree. We are getting 5 times as many staff applications as we're getting camper applications right now. It's crazy the amount of people applying. So yeah, it's time for us to not just raise our standards, but to be accountable with them, with our people. So Eric, Justin tells me that you fire a lot of people at Champions. That's the rumor.
Is that the rumor?
That's the rumor. But that's coming from someone that works with Dane Pickles, who likes to fire a lot of people too. So
Shout out Dane. Shout out Dane. Icon, legend in camp.
I don't know that we fire a lot of people, but I try not to be scared of that, because it may be the best answer or option for somebody if they're not working out. I don't want to see somebody struggle. And so often the approach that, or the way that I like to approach a situation where somebody's not working is up or out, right? Let me coach and support you and encourage you as much as possible. And our whole organization is going to figure out how can we set you up for success. And if something doesn't change quickly, if it doesn't get on the right trajectory, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean, what it means is this was not the right fit. This was not the right thing for you to be doing right now. And we're going to stop before you bring anybody else down.
I love it. I love up or out. And I just want to clarify that we day camp people are like, oh, day camp's so hard because we have buses and I don't want to fire this bus captain. He's from a town. I don't have anybody else could be on that bus. And there's all these things like that. We have a lot of staff kids and all these variables. Erec runs a sleepaway camp. Okay, we're finding staff in the middle of the summer is much more difficult, almost impossible. And his sleepaway camp is in 100-degree weather, okay, down in Texas. So if Erec has such a positive approach towards this and optimism and such, then I think day camp people really should, because we could just scoop up people in our towns if we need extra people, if we needed more bodies. So please continue, Mr. Hillis.
Well, Andy, actually, I have a question for you. You were talking about middle management and having hard conversations. And one of the things that landed for me was all of your middle management people are in leadership positions because they tend to be high achievers, capable, all of these things. And so when I have seen, for us, it's usually 22, 23, 24-year-olds who have been asked to come back and be promoted into this sort of position of responsibility. When they have struggled, it is to bring up issues or have hard conversations. It is often because they feel that they would be so embarrassed if somebody came to talk to them about this, about whatever has gone wrong, and so they actually amplify it in their mind.
Yes,
to be a bigger deal.
They're over empathetic.
They're over because it would be so they identify as being a higher achiever, and if somebody came and said, "Hey, you're not actually doing a good job," it would be a huge
shattering,
earth-shattering thing in their world, right? So how do you communicate with or coach your leadership staff to overcome that?
Well, the one thing I stress is that I've been in their situation. I know what it's like, and 98% of the time I finally garner the courage to have that conversation. That person knows damn well what I'm talking about, and is fine with hearing the feedback and is appreciative that I care enough to give them that feedback. So I think, like you said, that's a big deal. We over amplify it in our heads. That is such a huge deal. So I think giving them that awareness that this is what it's going to be, and this is how challenging it's going to be when you encounter that. But I still think they choose to take the passive aggressive route, and they're really nice people. I just go back to the Jonathan Gold ice cream thing. It's just so hard. I have a rule at my camp with staff and cell phones. Like if they're seen the first time, they get one warning, and after that they're fired, right? And yet I have people coming up to me saying, nobody's doing that. Nobody's holding that standard. You're saying it, but people aren't doing it. And I still struggle with getting that next level to have the courage to cut bait on somebody that they care for, right? Personally, even though professionally it may not be working out, but personally they like them because they're nice people. And that's it. And maybe it's a teacher mentality also, where people just don't generally get fired, right? Once you've got tenure, you're there to the rest of your life. Like, I don't know. I think it's hard for these people. They don't live in a real world, teachers. For over 100 years, summer camps have been an integral part of the A.M. Skyer world. A.M. Skyer is a strategic partner for summer camps across the country, building personal relationships and providing valuable resources to their clients and friends. Every day, A.M. Skyer is proud to support camps and make them safer. Skyer was founded by Abe Skyer in 1920 and is now the third generation of Skyer family leadership.
My friends Henry, Jeffrey, and Amy, and the experienced AM Skyer staff, they eat, sleep, and breathe summer camps while fostering partnerships with camps that last for decades, if not centuries. Give AM Skyer the opportunity to find solutions for your most challenging insurance needs. I can tell you firsthand, they truly go above and beyond. Learn more at amskyer.com. As a camp director, you're a leader of your camp and a pillar in your community. When your customers put tremendous trust in you, CampMinder's powerful management software tools deliver the day-to-day task support that helps you make every touchpoint moment memorable and every summer stellar. CampMinder has the most user-friendly platform for both your staff and your parents and is backed by a team of crafty engineers and customer service associates who are constantly thinking of ways to optimize your camp's database, communication, and financial management. With state-of-the-art app for your camp families and an API available for third-party softwares, CampMinder is always evolving elite summer camp software. Check them out today at campminder.com.
I have a question about that, and Erec, for Erec and Andy and everybody here. Like, the over empathetic piece, I think, is true for some of our middle management leaders, but I also think that they're afraid to make mistakes, which goes back, I think, to something Justin was saying about that structure of how they're giving feedback and our expectations of what feedback should look like in a camp setting. Because yes, a lot of them are nice, and some of them also come into these roles and are like, I'm the boss now, like, let me at them. And like, those aren't typically the ones we're hiring in a camp setting, but there is an element of that, of like, they're moving through the rankings of camp and they're power hungry a little bit. And so it's, how do we balance all that and maybe cater to all these different types of leaders we have and give them a structure of what keeping staff accountable looks like? I mean, for us, we redid a lot of our structure to build in that level of accountability for like on the job trainer, someone who's like not on the phones, they are on the ground following up on things that we need to keep staff accountable for. But yeah, so I don't know, like sometimes it's over empathetic, but I think a lot of it is they're afraid to make mistakes and disappoint anybody because they're those overachievers, Erec, like you were describing.
And I want to just continue your sentence. And they would rather deal with the situation they have at hand, even though it's dysfunctional or whatever, right? Because they know that situation and it's fear of the unknown. If we get rid of this person, we're going to put this unknown quantity in there and it could be worse. That's what they think in their head. I think also they don't have the confidence that it could be actually better.
I have the problem with them not addressing it immediately. So then by the end of the day, when they come and ask, how should I address this? You've missed the moment. You've missed the teachable moment. And now that person's going, what are you even talking about? So trying to get them to make sure that they're helping coach and correct immediately when something happens instead of waiting, because it loses impact.
Yeah, the passive aggressive thing, it's so problematic because when you're tough, it actually, people respect you more. But people think, your middle management people who are not used to being managers, they think that when you're tough, you're like losing respect, right? Like they don't understand that it's literally the same thing as being a counselor with kids. When you draw the lines in the sand, the kids are thankful for it.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, you're the oversensitive folks. The logic grounding question I like to ask is like, just like, how can this 3-minute conversation in week 1 save you 3 hours of drama in week 5? Because if we don't define this bar now, they're going to set it and it's going to be low. And that behavioral drift, especially with young people, is real. And one missed check-in generally becomes 5. And one snide comment becomes this toxic 5. And by the time directors step in, this damage is cultural. And so if we're not enforcing these basic expectations by week 1, mediocrity is the default. And when I think about coaching, it works when you start early and set expectations clearly and then enforce them. Because like belief in young people without feedback is just babysitting. And these staff don't need like this therapist necessarily. They just need someone who tells them the truth. And this is like an early and an often kind of truth. And growth for people generally has to start with friction. And belief is investing time, but not ignoring. And if you can align people that they only can get better by pushing them and then putting them in that situation, or then just carrying the load for them, that's the only way to get through this, because silence is violence in this like game. especially with the small amount of time that we actually have to have these conversations and within the whole summer.
Andy, a minute ago, you said one of the reasons that middle management struggles to have hard conversations is they would rather deal with the situation they're dealing with right now rather than the unknown, right? And I wonder if one way to approach that with our leadership teams is to say, I actually want you to handle, if we're doing up or out, if that's our strategy, I want you to be the up. I want you to be the encourager and the coach and the person that is doing everything you can to get a struggling staff member turned around in a position of success. Let me be the out, right? If a decision that somebody has to go home needs to be made, I will take responsibility for that. You're not going to. I want you to be the hero of the situation. I'll be the bad guy if necessary.
I really like that.
Yeah, I like that
That's
a
good.
lot. It's empowering. So I had Jay Frankel come and teach our leadership team about 10, 15 years ago. I don't know. And the premise of the entire training was when you're working with your staff and you're encountering, right, behaviors, performance issues, let's call it performance issues, right? How to identify quickly, is it a training issue or is it an attitude issue? And and Andy, like, yes, I am too nice too. I should be selling ice cream. But because I'm so optimistic about people, I always think it's a training issue. I always think, well, nobody told them, nobody explained it the right way to them, and all that kind of thing. But there has to be a point where maybe it's not an attitude or a training thing, it's a capability thing, right? Maybe that person just doesn't have it in them. Justin said it up front. Being a camp counselor is like the hardest job in the world. It's not for everybody. And that's usually how we're breaking up conversation with a counselor in the middle of summer starts. It's because it's true. This is so much different than working at a supermarket or something like that. It's just so complex and it takes so much motivation and all that and positivity and all that kind of stuff. It's so nuanced. So I find that these middle management people, they have a hard time determining that. And they certainly don't want to determine that this person's capability, that they just can't cut it. They're way too nice to make that determination. And I have to be the one to be like, no, that person can't do it. Like I have to like be, and I literally have to say, would you want your kid to be in this person's care? Well, forget it then. If you had to say, well, it's over with.
But I think that I love that. And we use that too. It's this training versus attitude or commitment. And like practicing that with your senior staff or your middle management so that maybe it's a training or commitment issue for them too, right? We need to train them on how to perceive the difference so that they can get into that mentality of talking it through and they can use that language with us, because there's oftentimes too where it's the first few days of camp and they're writing staff off, which when we're talking about accountability, I think that's where the training piece comes in of no, we have to give them a little more time. But who are we giving a little more time to? It goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Like, when are we saying we're done? Like, this is enough. We know you're kind of out of it for the summer early on. And when are we catching that, I guess, is my question too.
Well, I think an orientation is a great time because then you're not actually giving them a group of kids. I mean, so I understand that it's hard to make those assumptions right away, but if they're super obvious, then we can't be blind to that. But that's a great question. I open that up to other people.
Well, something that Erec talked about with the out thing is like when I think about Dane's role at Everwood, that's his job. He is out. You're out. You get called to talk to Dane at the picnic tables outside of the cooking classroom. Goodbye. Everyone knows if you're there with Dane, you're out.
Grim Reaper.
And so, yeah, pretty much. And so middle managers have to get these people excited to come back to camp tomorrow wearing a Halloween costume for Halloween Day. So they cannot be these like people throwing down this feedback. But you talked about it, Andy, in your last podcast with Emily Galinsky with like camper behavior. You talked about age appropriate versus inappropriate. And the same thing is for like what is acceptable in this job at this phase of it. Because I don't expect anyone to show up and be a world beater. And when we train the staff member taking care of 7-year-olds for like what to do when this kid gets out and gaga and goes, I don't want to play anymore. Like, they still might not have it yet because on that day at that time, it might not work in terms of how to handle it. But I think that our job ultimately is to make this chaos look like magic, and that takes systems, and that takes us checking in with these middle managers about how their staff are performing and what they're seeing and how they're correcting behavior. And it takes note taking, and it takes them not only paying attention to the high performers, but also not only paying attention to the low performers. And it just takes actual management is really all it is, and then feedback and going up the chain of command. I don't think it's rocket science at the end of the day. But if I went up to a middle manager and I asked them about their division, they should tell me something about everyone, which means they can't be looking after 30 people.
Right. And the culture at your camp, you talked about culture earlier. If the other staff have that high standard, they're not going to want to be associated with the one who definitely just doesn't have it. And so they're going to get restless. They're going to have some repercussions on that person because they don't want this behavior happening. So much better to come from us than to let the culture take over and have them beat up from within.
I want to jump in with a thought here. And this is, I did a tri-state presentation on staff accountability, which ended up being more of a kind of collaborative working session. But the premise was, as camps, I think we tend to be, I think there are sort of four phases, like training and prevention of issues, right? Getting people into the culture, keeping them on track. So that's like one-on-one conversations and coaching and like supporting. A third one, which I'm gonna come back to in a second. And then the fourth one, if it's really not working out, is termination. And I think the three, numbers 1, 2, and 4, training, one-on-one coaching, and then termination necessary, we actually tend to be pretty good at. And the third one, there's this massive gap for situations where it's not bad enough to let somebody go, but just kind of sitting down and having the heart to heart and relying on a great culture that you built and a one-on-one relationship just isn't cutting it. We are terrible, tend to be.
That could be a third of your staff. Totally.
In terms of consequences for misbehaviors, there are, I think there 2/3 people tend to really respond to, oh, okay, I'm sitting down with a leadership member or a director. They're going to give me some feedback. We're going to work on this. I care. I want to do well. There's some portion of people who just need structure and to be slapped on the wrist if they have their phone or if they sign in late from an off period or whatever. And I think that's the sort of structure or system gap that a lot of camps could do well to try to do a little bit more filling in on, and then be really clear about if A, B, or C happens, X, Y, or Z is the consequence. And by the way, the first time, that's fine. The second time, it's the consequence we're going to talk about. And the third time, or however you want to do it. But at some point, if you're continuing, if the consequence isn't working, that's when we're going to go to termination.
Yeah. This goes back to we're too nice, and we don't want to put these things in because we don't want to get to that point. So that's what I think. I think that's beneath it all. So I interviewed a guy for my staff recruitment role a year or so ago, and he was one of the head recruiters and staff coordinators at a Six Flags, where he had to manage tons of seasonal people, right? And we started talking about accountability. And he was just like, well, what's the big deal? I don't understand. Like a great adventure, we have a system where if you screw up, you get a point. If you come in late, you get a point. If you do this, you get 2 points. Like he had this whole point system. Once you hit 10 points, you're suspended for 2 days. And once you hit 15 points, you're fired. Like it's out of our hands. Like it's just this point system. And I was just like, wow, that seems super easy and super like not campy, right?
Not campy. That's the key. Yeah.
But that's what goes with what you're saying, Eric. Like camps generally don't have anything like that. And I hear it all the time from my people. There's also it takes a village, right? And we have a whole continuum of personalities and stuff at our camps. And just like Jordanna said, there's people who are super empathetic, then there's people who get a collar and a walkie-talkie and they turn into little dictators, right? But there's also people who are like these type A accountability people, and they're like, there has to be consequences, right? This person has come in late 3 days in a row. What are we doing? And then I get hit with the equity people who are just like, well, this person has anxiety, needs to see their phone once or twice a day. This person, they're from this culture where being on time is not the most important thing. All this kind of, like, I get all these things like that too. And again, we're a camp. We're super nice people. We happen to be like super liberal and belonging and all that wonderful stuff, right? So I think that plays a role in us not being like a Six Flags where it's so cut and dry, because we tend to look at everybody as a unique person. And when it's a small camp, we were talking about this before we went on, if you only had 40 staff or 60 staff, even more so,
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And I think that it goes back to you've got, if you, let's say you have 100 people on your staff, right? You're going to have people who respond to different things, right? Some people are really going to respond to just clear upfront expectations. Okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to try really hard to do that. Some people are going to respond to, you know what? I'm working for Jordanna. She's the leadership person in charge of my group or whatever. And I just really respect her. And she has put a lot of effort into developing a relationship with me. And that's why I want to do the right thing so that I don't disappoint her. And then there's some people who are just going to, what do I need to do to keep my job? Right. And so it's this, we want to believe so much in people to be here for the right reasons and have an impact on kids. And that's fantastic. And most are here for that reason. But I think what we forget is that people respond to different types of incentive structures.
What do you do with the person who's fantastic when they're there? They're an amazing counselor, but they're really irritating about being on time or handing in paperwork or those other menial things that you could get these points on if you were doing it in a point system, but they actually are a fantastic
Right.
counselor.
They're magical with the kids, but they can't
Yes.
get to work on time. Yeah.
So how do
Happens
you
all the time.
weight the things that they do wrong? When does it come out that this is way more important to me than that is?
Well, in one way, you find out what that person cares about, right? Why are they magical with kids? Because they want to create this incredible experience. Well, when you're late to work, you're shortchanging the kids, right? We have to be on time. And then you create whether you're more of a create a performance plan or attach consequence or whatever it is, but say, this is why this matters. This is the purpose. I find one of the things I struggle with is it's harder about turning in paperwork on time. It's like, well, it really makes the operation run smoother for me administratively. And so I think you have to pick your battles a little bit with that stuff. What's really, really important to draw a line on, and what can you decide to be okay with?
Yeah, it's hard because
Mostly.
I mean, it's something we haven't said yet, so I just have to say it, right? But it's when you condone these, even if they're small things like coming in late, like when you don't say anything, you're condoning it.
Well, it's that
And
if you don't inspect it, they won't respect it, or what you tolerate is just going to keep showing up, right? At your camp.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source for recreation solutions that will help ensure that your camp thrives this summer. Check out their inflatable aquapark courses for pools or lakes, the prime carts, the cool little go-kart things, the emergency alert and lightning detection systems. Whoa! The splash pads. Well, if you got the money for that, splash pads is the way to go with the heat we got. The Zoom Flume. A lot less money and talk about the most awesome water slip and slides that you could possibly get. The jumpers, okay, for bouncing all around the place. Mini golf. The prefab cabins and pavilions and bathrooms. The shade structures. Lord, do we need shade structures these days. The shade structures cannot be beat. And of course, the playgrounds, including the ones with the cool musical components. Anyway, CRS Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source. Explore their website today at crs4rec.com because CRS is serious about fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many fancy sayings for what we're talking about. If it's not measured, it doesn't matter. This is not a charity for mediocre staff to like collect checks. This is a mission that we work year round to achieve with kids. And I think our exceptional staff really take on like what the philosophical values of Everwood and camp and what it can do for young people. And they take it on. And when I think about trying to get people to camp, we've lowered the bar significantly. The interest form, immediate conversation with me, but we have to raise the bar to stay. And that is how we build culture at camp. And so when I think about like growing into the job and like people being late, like I can't have them lower the bar until they basically trip over it. And so I'm okay if it is creating a toxic vibe of people getting pissed off that this person is being late. If they're skilled but toxic, fire them. Like if they care but aren't skilled, coach them. But if they're neither, what are we talking about then, right? And
Justin, their car broke down and they're borrowing their dad's car, and their dad doesn't get home from work until after they need to leave to get to camp, and blah 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 blah. Like
And this is
sometimes
an
it's not an
amazing.
attitude, sometimes not an
Sure,
attitude thing.
Andy, but what you're bringing up is a situation that I think you have to be a little bit of a psychopath if you're like a general population staff to hear that and go, yeah, that person sucks. I hate them. Like that makes sense. That is normal. That is human nature. We're talking about people being consistently late here who are good with kids. Like, kabosh, if that's pissing people off, that's my reason to want to move on from them, right? Look, if someone gets hit by a freaking car, I don't expect them to be at work. Like, I'm not insane, right? We're the camp that if you email me today and say, hey, I have to miss 2 weeks because I'm going to Switzerland, I'm going to say, okay, bet you're a floater. That's it. That's the email. Like, I don't care if you give me notice, right? If you can't do the minimum, like, come on. At what point are we pushovers? I'm not here to be a pushover. Like, we have to have a backbone, and my backbone can take a lot, but at a certain point, no.
Yeah.
And I think we all run summer camps where we have like a 30-something day summer, right? And I think it's easy for some people outside of the industry and sometimes even in it to kind of be like, you're taking it too seriously, or some staff who don't get it, right? And who aren't in it and don't understand your culture yet to have that perspective too. And I think it's important that we just stand by what we're all about, right? These are our standards at our camps, and here's how we're going to reinforce them. That consequences piece, Erec, you're talking about is like such an interesting one because I think that everybody tackles that differently. And Justin, we were just talking about your praise model at Everword too. And so I'm kind of wondering if we could chat a little bit about like consequences and praise. Like what's better? What do we focus on more? What do we put more emphasis on? What are your thoughts on all that?
I think where Eric and I are going to be aligned, and I don't know if he defined it necessarily when mentioning how he labeled that feedback, but like circling it back to why we are here, and like how like when you are not on time, you are screwing over these kids in these ways, and the same way that we're praising people of like, I have my 5 values for like why I want to recognize people, entrepreneurship being one, like taking advantage of a situation, making it your own, and adapting, doing something awesome, right? Like circling back to like how you are the author of these kids' experiences and you're doing this amazing thing, you're making that extra effort. Here's why you're getting X. It's the same way I want to throw down the hammer for why you're getting Y in terms of like negativity. And just making it clear so that no one should ever be unsure for why they're being recognized in either way, I feel like. And making it clear why we're here. And when I think about the layout of staff training and what we actually think about what people are going to take away, only 10% of their training is probably going to come from listening, 20% from that coaching, and that 70% from the on the job, that 70-20-10 model. I do firmly believe in, especially with day camp and 14 hours of staff training. Like that is how it happens.
I think these are just all tools, and it's a yes and. You need all of these things. You need good training, great communication of purpose, good relationships, good culture, good praise, good incentives for doing a great job, good consequences if you don't. Like if you're building a table, right? You are going to build a better table if you have more tools, right? If you just have a hammer and a saw, it's going to look like seventh grade woodshop, right? But if you also have a drill and a sander and a measuring tape and all the other things, this is not an either or in my mind.
So I'm curious, do any of you guys have anything in your camps, like anywhere between like the Great Adventure thing or something like if and when somebody messes up, right? Besides like, okay, they're spoken to. Like, does anything get written? Or does anything that get given to like a supervisor? Is there anything formalized, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, we have an oral warning and then 2 written warnings, and then you're gone. Unless the first offense is so extreme that you're just gone immediately.
Right. They're smoking bong hits. I can't. Right. Right.
Right.
So I like that. So you do have something formal. That's great. Look at it. The rec person has it. All right. See all you private camps out there. Learn something.
We
We
have
use a
a
spreadsheet. Like ours is an Excel spreadsheet. It's
Mhm.
called the Eagle. That's our logo. We're an eagle. And then the kids version, when we do this stuff with kids, is the eaglet, like a baby eagle. And we're tracking success that staff are having, not so great things that staff are doing, things staff are asking about. what they want more training on. When I think about the questions we implore our middle managers to ask, questions of that nature, and then writing down the answers so that I can see what we're missing and things to do to fix, and then like a general comments thing as well. And so that would get charted. That like if I gave Erec feedback and Erec is a fourth grade staff member, I could just go into that and add it at the end of the day so that everyone's on the same page that that had happened.
That's great. Yeah, we have our standard evaluations like throughout the summer, so 2 per summer, and then we put that on their file to consult for next year. But outside of that, we typically use a form that's called the Start, Stop, Continue, and so it helps our middle management keep track of the conversations they've had with their staff. What have we talked about stopping to do, starting to do, or keep doing that? It's awesome. And then at the end of the summer, we do have our middle management put together recommendations for next year, kind of with notes about their performance and on whether they'd recommend for rehire.
We also have a formal kind of check-in and documentation procedure that happens kind of throughout the different sessions and throughout the summer. I think the part that we have been missing for the last couple of years or have not done as well is have a sort of a formalized playbook or tool belt that we can use as a team, whether it's the directors or the leadership, middle management, for both consequences when something goes wrong and also staff appreciation things when things are going well, right? And so like when I was a counselor 20 years ago, if somebody had a phone, they got fined. If somebody drank, they got fired. And if somebody came in late from an off night, they got their next off night, like taken away, right? And those things don't work anymore because fines and, well, if somebody drinks and gets terminated, that's fine if that's the rule. But fines and taking away off time feel draconian to this age group, right? We don't pay enough to be able to fine people anyway. And I want them to use their off time. But what I'm trying to create now, so this last year, I've spent a lot of time putting together different groups of like a response system, right? And so I have 5 categories. If this is, can I spend like 2 minutes on this?
Yeah, please.
So 5 categories of things to do when, or how to follow up when something goes wrong, and we need something more than a one-on-one conversation and just like leaning on the culture, leaning on the relationship. So category 1 is the warning system, right? Whether it's verbal or written, how do you kind of move from, hey, I'm letting you know this is a problem, to I need to see a difference or there's going to be a change, right? So verbal or written or a probation thing, or I've heard camps talk about a suspension thing, just like go home for today, come back tomorrow, reset, right? This is category 1. Category 2 is take something away, right? So this is phone jail, right? If you just need to take their phone away, or if you need to take away a free period, or if you need to have them sit out from being a part of some kind of special event or not go on an off-camp trip, something like that. Category 3 is add something that they don't necessarily want to do, that's not fun. So picking up an extra job or responsibility, an extra on duty, have them attend some kind of extra training, create an improvement plan. So we have to sit down and we're adding an improvement plan or behavior contract, something like that. Category 4 is like I'm calling natural consequences. So like if you break something, you're going to be a part of fixing it, right? If you cause more work for somebody else, you're going to be a part of making that right for that person. If there's a problem because 2 staff members just only want to hang out with each other and aren't actually paying attention to the kids, facilitating the activity, okay, we're going to separate those staff members, right? Those are easy natural consequences. And then the 5th category I got is unnatural consequences. So things that are silly and campy, but get the point across. So like, all right, something went wrong, put them in the dunk tank. After dinner, let campers throw softball.
Tarred and feathered.
Yeah, exactly. But in a fun way, right? It doesn't actually, no one's getting hurt, but what's another? So like if somebody's not where they're supposed to be, okay, the thing that's going to happen or that you can expect, and we'll tell you this during training, you're just going to get shot with a water gun if you're not in the location you're supposed to be.
Well, in Jeff Lake, they pie them at their assembly.
Oh, there you go.
When they
Okay,
mess up.
I like this. This is like kind of goofily calling this unnatural consequences, but I just think and by the way, I realize I'm harping on the negative part of this. I want to create the exact same thing. Here are 5 different categories of staff appreciation things. When something goes well, here are 10 different ideas for how to tell somebody, hey, I appreciate that, or ways to follow up on and reinforce good behavior. So, but I think building those out as tool kits for leadership probably is something that we should be putting a lot of attention toward.
Yeah, well, I think what you sort of outlined there at the end is accountability for for directors and middle management for doing good things, for your staff doing good things, right? Like you should be accountable to that. You shouldn't miss that opportunity, right? Just the same way you want to miss telling them they shouldn't be late. No doubt about it. That was really interesting, Eric. I appreciate it. That's a lot of food for thought. So I still go back to the beginning, where to me that missing piece that we struggle with is how do we get our next level people down to be tough, right? Look, realizing that we at the top have trouble being tough as well, but that next level down. And to me, like it starts with modeling, right? Like you can't have your middle management people be laxing and expect the people that they're supervising to adhere to a higher standard. It can't be do as I say and not as I do. Right. So you're like somebody said, like you're working for Jordanna. Like look at Jordanna. Like she's inspiring the way that she keeps to the standard of what she says and does. That should inspire most of your people to adhere to that standard. But I just struggle getting my next level to be tough.
I think it's practice, practice, practice. I think everything is just how do I do this? How do I have the tough conversation? I feel like we're all on the same page about the structure that is so supportive of people that are giving feedback, and structure helps. But practicing scenarios I found is the most beneficial thing. So coming up with all those camp scenarios, I know we have our like senior staff retreat next weekend where we're digging into a lot of this to practice the scenarios. We're also doing something of like get feedback from other people, role play it, watch it play out. Last year, I asked all my senior staff to like rank from like 1 to 5 how hard they think they are and how soft they think they are in terms of like giving feedback. And it was such an interesting exercise because kind of before we went in, we're like, oh, these people are going to rate themselves on this level of the scale and others on the other. When we got there, we found that they had a really hard time doing that self reflection and that awareness piece of where they actually fall on that spectrum. And so I think it's important to like dig in and kind of hold up that mirror to our staff of like where do you fall? How can you take ownership of the impact you're having in supporting your staff? And how does that pair with practicing the actual scenarios and saying the words, having the conversation even before camp starts?
Yeah, I've got an intergenerational question. I wonder how you guys think about it, being that we have like boomers down to Gen Z on this podcast
We're
here.
all well represented
Yeah,
here.
we're well represented, but a lot of camps, like Justin's or other people were saying, like have a lot of people in their 20s, in their early 20s even, as middle management, and I find that it's tougher for them because they're so near peers, right? And I feel like the older you get, the less you give a shit about how people think about you, right? You're not there to be liked as much, and you're fine with that. Like that sort of comes with experience, and because you said yourself, experience is important. Experience is time, and time could be age, also, right? And I find that older staff, they still struggle. Their school teachers are not used to doing this kind of thing, but still, it's easier for them. And younger people, yeah, it's just you're too close in age, and you want to hang out with them on the weekend and all that kind of thing. So just thoughts on that, because I know a lot of camps, their core middle management people are in their 20s.
I think
Older, I was
the
just gonna
bigger
say,
problem, Andy, for younger people is that they want to be perfect because they are like so focused on being perfect. And so just like teaching them that you don't need to be perfect, you need to just be intentional. And it's the same with managing a group of children. The kids aren't going to listen to you if they don't respect you and if you don't know them. So you have to, like, loyalty cannot be demanded, right? It needs to be earned through dignity and trust and growth. And so you got to ritualize the idea of like talking to someone for 10 minutes every single day and like getting to know them, because then you can tell them that they're doing something wrong in a way that's not condescending because they know you and they like you. So they're going to
And they
listen to
want to
you.
please you. And they want to please you.
Exactly. So like when I think about that 10-minute like conversation you're going to have with your staff member every single day, the focus is like vibes, goals, and obstacles. Like what is hard? What is frustrating you in your job? Like, please tell me. Like, give them a voice. If you don't give your staff a voice, Glassdoor will be their voice. So give them a voice. Like, let them tell you what they think, what they want to be doing. Like, what do you think you were going to be able to do at camp they haven't been able to do yet? Like, and then obviously make these things happen. But like, and then vibe. Talk about how the Los Angeles Clippers are crushing the Nuggets in this series. Like, talk about whatever they're interested in. Because I think at the end of the day, great middle managers are supposed to make everything feel easier and more human. And if it's very inhumane, if like I don't know you and you show up and you tell me I'm bad at my job. And no one's also really comfortable with doing that these days. So we just have to vibe. We just have to all be friends.
And frankly, that's easier when you're closer in age.
I 100% agree with that.
Benefit.
That is a very lucky thing that we are fortunate to have it everywhere. To have strong 21 to 27-year-olds in particular who crush at this.
Right, because I feel like my division leaders that are in their, let's say, 40s or 50s, that it's more daunting for that counselor to be able to go to them, tell them they messed up, or tell them they're struggling on something, right? When it's someone that's a little more peer of theirs, it's easier. That's a great point. Any last thoughts? I
have something to add here, unless Sam, you're trying to jump in.
No, I was just earlier going to say that the older you are, the more you have scars or scabs from things that didn't go right. And so you're maybe a little wiser to the emotional part of this, but
yeah, because it's going to work out fine.
Right.
So this other thought I'm having is more to do with the kind of the previous question about how to help middle management care enough / be good at / be comfortable with some of these conversations. And that is especially, I think almost all of ours are kind of 22, 23, 24-year-olds who are doing this maybe last summer at camp or whatever it is before they're going to go off into the rest of their career. And I think being able to tell them and kind of show a critical leadership skill that will serve you well and allow you to move ahead in your career is being able to not just give feedback, but coach somebody into being a better team member. If you can do that, you're a value multiplier. And whatever organization you go work for, you are going to be such a valuable asset to that group. They're going to want you managing more people, all of these things. And so if you can get comfortable with going to a relatively near peer staff member and saying, hey, here's what I'm saying. Or do you agree with what we're saying? Here's what we talked about during orientation. Or training. Here's something that I think can get us going in the right direction. How can I help you do that? Right? And give them little chunks of it, but say this skill, if you can practice now and demonstrate later, you're going to be at an advantage in your career. And I think it adds a small piece of motivation to say, oh man, this is a little uncomfortable. I don't really want to have to do this, but I know that there's a payoff later.
Can I shout out Erec for something he said to me like a year plus ago that I've said a million times to staff? I think it's really smart. He said to frame this conversation with the idea of like, do you want to be a top performer? Now, I don't like come in and go, do you want to be like a top performer? Do you want to be a force multiplier? Like, I don't say it like that, but it's like, don't you want to be the best division leader at camp? They're like, yeah. And it's like, all right, here's what I need you to do. Like you like put it in that because everyone wants to be the best. Everyone wants to be perfect in this day and age. And I thought that was a very good level setting tool that I've been able to use.
That's great. I want to end on a positive note with that because that was super. That really was. And by the way, somebody mentioned that we're all doing 30-something days of camp. Erec, how many days of camp do you have? What's your camp season?
70 with campers, 84 if you include training.
You hear that? All right.
I'm 50 days, so somewhere in between.
That's pretty good. Eric's counting weekends. All right, no weekends off. Wow, that's formidable. Again, in Texas. Okay, let's just emphasize that. And I've been to these bunks, no air conditioning. Okay, just big fans. It's a different breed down there. So thank you guys. I want to thank our friends at AM Skyer, at Campminder, Camptivities, and Commercial Recreation Specialists for helping bring this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, you should subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out the show notes from our episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info for the show, for our guests Justin and Erec, and for me, Sam, and Jordanna. Thanks for listening and making yourself a better Day Camp Pro. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. This is our last official episode. We might throw a bonus one in there. All right, but anyway, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, or we'll see you in a couple of months. It's the Day Camp Pod. Thanks.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by Go Camp Pro and the Go Camp Pro Podcast Network. Find a podcast for camp professionals of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Thanks for listening, friends. Hey, Camp Pros. We love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, we hope that whenever you share an idea that you learned from the Camp Hacker podcast, conference, summer camp professionals group, or wherever else, that you're quick to give credit where credit is due. That way, we can all encourage more camp pros to share the tips and tricks that will make camp